Hello, I'm Cynthia Rickard, 41-year reporter and editor of the now closed Youngstown Vindicator. Welcome to the Scribbler Podcast. America today finds itself at another crossroads in our history. Like the years following our Declaration of Independence, we again have a choice to make between freedom or subjugation to a totalitarian ruler. For women especially, that potential ruler spells oppression, regression, and the further loss of freedoms which we believed were ours forever. But here we are, 247 years later, and the felling of Roe v. Wade, as doctors predicted to us well before it happened, is causing suffering to untold families across our country. And the man who engineered that now suggests contraception will also be on the chopping block, should he be given another chance in the Oval Office. He has changed the landscape for women in the U.S. so much that even an NFL football player recently felt comfortable enough to announce publicly that we women will find our greatest fulfillment as housewives and mothers. Donald Trump has bragged about his freedom to grab women by their genitals anytime he wants, and has now been criminally convicted of lying about his extramarital affairs during his third marriage in order to win the 2016 presidential election. But strangely, to a majority of us American women, he has a following of other American women of all ages who think he'd be perfect to sit in the Oval Office again and represent us Americans to the world. So today, I and my co-host, Bertram de Souza, a fellow Youngstown Vindicator editor and columnist of 40 years, are here to talk with women of several generations about that dichotomy of opinion and about the impact of his actions and behavior and words on their own lives. Our guests are former Ohio State Representative June Lucas, retired journalist Emily Webster Love, and Youngstown State University professor Taci Turel.
Let me start with the 80th anniversary. During ceremonies commemorating the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, which ultimately led to the liberation of Europe during World War II, US President Joe Biden, French President Emmanuel Macron, and other leaders heaped praise on the hundreds of thousands of men and women who served during the war. The word heroes was used repeatedly. Cindy, your late dad, my former father-in-law, volunteered for service and was a gunner on a B-17 bomber. The plane was shot down over Germany and he wound up in a prisoner of war camp. But here's what Donald Trump has said about POWs when denigrating the late US Senator John McCain, who spent 5.5 years in a notorious North Vietnamese prison known as the Hanoi Hilton, and where he was repeatedly tortured. Here's what Trump said, quote, "He's not a war hero. He was a war hero because he was captured. I like people who weren't captured." Sin, what would you say to Trump, given your dad's experience as a POW?
Well, I was highly incensed and offended by that remark because John McCain's always been a hero of mine, probably because I knew a little about what he and his family had gone through based on what my dad and our family went through. So I think that I would tell him he's a coward and a hypocrite and a traitor to the country that my dad and John McCain served. My dad, as you said, flew 50 missions before he was shot down and went to one of Hitler's prison camps where Trump couldn't last a day. And John McCain served honorably before and after he was incarcerated in the horrific Hanoi Hilton. He even refused to leave that when he was given the chance unless they released all of his men with him. Yeah. By comparison, Trump did everything he could to avoid service, claiming bone spurs would keep him out. My mother would have slapped him silly. Mm-hmm. He practices hate and vengefulness and shouts rigged at everything that he finds offensive to himself. I just feel, I would say to him, he's not fit to shine my dad's or John McCain's shoes.
Right.
Emily and June, would you like to weigh in on this, please?
Well, didn't Trump proclaim himself to be a hero because he didn't get a venereal disease
Yes,
during
yes,
the,
yes,
oh, what
Yeah.
bravery, God.
yeah.
You know, it doesn't frighten me so much how he identifies himself as a hero.
Yeah,
What frightens me is the group of people who see him as a hero. And if you look at that group of people, it's a collective bunch of losers who see their salvation in him.
yeah.
They think they are the same person he says he is. It's scary how many people we have
Yeah,
that know in their hearts that they aren't measuring up.
Yeah.
That's scary.
And Emily, in that regard, you recently posted on Facebook a hard-hitting commentary on Trump and his conviction of 34 felony charges. I'd like you to read that entire post for those who have not seen it, and then tell us what prompted you to write it. And also, and this would go to you, June, and also to Cindy and Taci. How do you explain the continued support Donald Trump is receiving from women?
Okay. This is the post. His demented supporters can cheer him on to hell and back. The world knows what he is: an adulterer, a cheat in business and private life, an incurable liar, a bloated, self-important braggart who believes he is above the law. When the law shows him he's not, then of course the law and the entire American system of government must be corrupt. And his gullible sheep bleat the same miserable opinion. But for me, there is special joy in knowing that this loathsome excuse for a man who loved to talk about his success in seducing women, who bragged that he could grab them by their body parts because when you're a star, you can. He's been revealed to be a poor run-of-the-mill John who pays for sex, and that he's been brought down by a woman at the very bottom of the social ladder, a porn star to whom he had to give even more money to buy her silence. And it never occurred to him that paying for that silence from campaign and business funds was illegal. Stupid, stupid man. Of the several trials he faces, this was the weakest one, and he lost it hands down in the minds of a jury of his peers. Save your pity for when Melania gets done with him. And you know,
You always could write.
June, does it take it back to the March on Washington we went to?
Oh, indeed it does. Emily and I had a lot of bus trips together.
Oh my God, we slept on each other's shoulders, remember? But there was a post from a Trump admirer that said, and it had the picture of it was a meme, and it had the photo of the back of a tattooed motorcycle rider. And the slogan was, "I'll vote for the outlaw, not the kid sniffer," meaning, referring to Joe Biden's kissing the top of his granddaughter's head. And it occurred to me that those people think of him as an outlaw, above the law, a big, tough, motorcycle riding outlaw, right?
Exactly.
Paid for sex. He pays for sex.
And,
He
and
pays not call girls. He pays what she herself referred to, as you remember, a professional. He pays professionals for sex. And men admire it. I don't get it.
Yes.
I just don't get it.
I don't
He
either.
has to cheat in order to have money in his pocket. He lets these little minions of his factotum, do all his dirty work and pay the money out front. And he's supposed to be the gang leader?
yeah.
The Godfather would be terribly ashamed of him.
We're in trouble.
Well,
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast on the way over, and they were talking about that his support comes from the fact that his supporters hate the same people that he hates. And so they feel that he is representing them. And
Exactly.
I don't know if any of you heard the clips from this last rally that he had out in Vegas in the 110-degree
Yes.
heat. He was cursing left and right, and
Yes.
they were cheering him on like crazy. So he's got that street vernacular down, but he also denigrated the technical people and said, if they do a terrible job, he didn't use that word, that he just doesn't pay them. And they were cheering. And
Yeah.
all of those people that are standing there are in the same ranks as the people that he doesn't pay. I don't understand the working class men and women who support him and admire him when he has stiffed every person who has worked for him.
Right, when he was building those casinos, and there was a company in Ashtabula County that helped build one of those casinos in Atlantic City. He refused to pay that, and they couldn't afford legal, lawyers and all the way he could. Thus forcing them to agree to pay a dime or a dollar. And I mean, this is his history. June, let me go specifically to you on over 3 decades ago. You, as a member of the Ohio House of Representatives, warned that the Caveman Caucus, made up of right-wing Republican legislators, posed a clear and present danger to women's rights, especially abortion. Not only were you right about Ohio, you certainly were a visionary with regard to this country. In Donald Trump, we have the king of the Caveman Caucus.
Yeah.
So talk to us about your experience with these Republicans, and how is it that women in this day and age are willing to be subservient to the likes of Trump? June?
Well, I served with Jim Jordan,
Did you?
that paragon of virtue.
My God.
And now to see him
Yes.
on as chair of the Judiciary Committee of the House, it's beyond my wildest dreams. I just can't believe it. And I do not understand why women would be so enchanted with him. Although I saw the same dynamic with Jim Trafficant.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Jim Trafficant at a huge rally at the Mahoning Valley Country Club. When he came in, women mobbed the stage,
Yes.
just mobbed the stage. And Trafficant and Trump seem to have that same charisma. And I'll be damned if I can figure out what it is. I don't know.
But when you were serving with these Republicans, and I interviewed you about it, we did columns and editorials about it, about your warnings about what was going on, because you saw what was happening in the General Assembly. You saw the direction that these Republicans were going in. Why weren't more people concerned about that? Why weren't more not Democrats or Republicans, but just Ohioans and now Americans
I don't
concerned
know.
about
It was really hard to convey the urgency in this issue, and trying to get young women especially to pay attention that this is something that there are people working day and night to overturn. And I think they didn't believe me. And I felt like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, because I was really on a soapbox about that. But they figured that the law would never change. Once Roe was established, we were good forever.
Yeah.
And I could see how hard these people were working. They worked round the clock. They would come to offices after hours. I remember working one time about 5:30 in the afternoon before an evening committee, and who appeared but the Janet Folger, who was the head of the Ohio Right to Life at that time. And she peeked in the door and said, "Oh, hello, Representative. Could I have a minute of your time?" And I mean, they didn't quit. They never quit. And they sure won. They outworked us. There's no doubt about it.
Well, and they spent 50 years doing it. So those incremental things that were happening that you could see, nobody else was paying any attention to.
No.
Let me bring Taci in here, because Taci, you have a unique perspective of women in politics. having come to the United States from Turkey. In your native country, the president, although elected, governs as a dictator. In the United States, Donald Trump has said he wants to be a dictator for a day if he's elected in November. What are the danger signs for women if Trump becomes president, given how women are looked upon as by many in Turkey as second-class citizens, and also in countries that are governed by dictators? So, give us your perspective, Taci.
Well, I mean, since I am from Turkey, I often compare political movements in different countries, but especially Turkey and the United States. And it's fascinating to me how similar the political moves are. And I believe that this is because, humans are the same everywhere. They have the same type of biases, they react to similar impulses, and they feel connected to political leaders in very similar ways. And when I watch American politics, I feel like history is repeating itself because US is mirroring all of Turkey's past mistakes, and everything that happened in Turkey seems to happen in the US with some time lag. So I'll tell you, one of the things that led to the election of President Erdogan in Turkey was that the conservatives felt they were alienated, looked down upon by the seculars, and that they were belittled, or they were called uneducated, ignorant. And I think American people don't understand how much that resentment sits there silently, and then it explodes at some point. So that led to Erdogan's election. And I saw the same situation in 2016 that led to Trump's election. So the environment and the polarization was so similar. So I knew Trump was going to get elected because this is what happened. And I think one of the things that Trump gets, and Erdogan has a similarity in that, like, as a political personality, they know how to impact people who are alienated like that. And they are able to show themselves as someone who support them. So when people see somebody controversial like Trump, who can speak the things they think about, but they're not able to speak because the society kind of condemns that kind of behavior. But when they see it in Trump, they feel an even stronger connection to him. And I also think that because Trump represents the other side, he's not one of those, he's against those who belittle them in a way. So I feel like, people connect with him. And once the voters have their opinions established, it is so hard to change that. And I mean, if you remember, Erdogan actually was put in jail before he was elected, and that didn't really change the outcome. He was still elected even after he was put in jail. So
Was he in jail when he was elected?
I believe he was in jail, but he could still run, and his party won the election. And then they did some tricks. He got out of jail. Of course, granted, I want to be careful comparing Erdogan to Trump because Erdogan was never charged with rape or adultery. It was more of a political charge. And so when he got out of jail, he was put in power, but he was the prime minister at the time, not the president. But one of the things about women's rights, of course, in Turkey, it wasn't all that great before Erdogan, but I was reading some statistics. In 2002, a year before Erdogan was elected, femicides, which are like homicides against women who are killed by men, that was about, there were 66 cases in Turkey. 2003 was when Erdogan was elected. And in the next 10 years, femicides increased 14 times. I mean, I'm not a sociologist, and I can't say that it directly correlates to Erdogan being elected, that, violence against women increased. But, they couldn't stop it for a while. And so there was an international treaty that Turkey signed in, I believe in 2011, which was a Council of Europe Convention on preventing violence against women and domestic violence. Turkey was one of the first countries that signed it, and it was signed by another 45 countries and the European Union. And it's called the Istanbul Convention in Turkey. So Turkey entered that because, the femicides were going up, violence against women were going up. And although I can't say that it directly correlates, I can say that the government with Erdogan and a lot of other people in the government made some very sexist comments and sometimes, a very chauvinist type of government. So you see that men may have felt more empowered because the courts didn't punish them as harshly as before. And that increased the number of violence against women and murders of women. And then 3 years ago, Turkey decided to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention. So Erdogan announced that he was withdrawing from it because it was against our cultural values and, so
God.
this is what happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, today in Turkey, violence against women is still very high, murdering of women, and most of these are by, intimate partners like husbands or fathers. So this is something that could happen in the US if somebody like Trump is in power.
But there is a definite religious correlation
Yes.
in this picture
Absolutely, yes.
between Turkey and the United States, because the United States is now becoming a theocracy.
Yes,
And we
right.
are having, where the Puritans have come back.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the problems. Correct me if I'm wrong, June, but I think the word abortion is an ugly word.
It is.
It's an ugly word.
thing.
If you
Right.
would call it termination, it wouldn't be so ugly. It's an ugly word. We are, as a society, we claim that we believe in a higher power and he or she directs what we do. We don't all subscribe to that, but the great, great, great majority of us do. And there's something that responds when a group says, God does not intend for you to abort his intent. That's an argument that goes right back to when you were a little kid. Okay. I think that the influences over women are so strong and that they don't even recognize it themselves. I remember writing a column when the pedophilia in the Catholic Church first came out.
Yeah.
In the schools, right?
Yeah.
My own kids had gone to Catholic school. I had been aware that they were watchful. The kids had to be watchful.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh.
So I wrote a column that said the blame for this belongs largely on the mothers who accept the authority of a priest
Yes.
based on the fact that he's a priest. Okay. And all you have to do is say, no, you can't do that. I'll take my kid out of your school. And all of a sudden their power is gone.
Right.
Somehow this man has appealed to the part of women that sees themselves as being used, as being born to be used.
Mm-hmm.
You see them at his meetings. They hold up signs saying, you can get my anytime. Okay.
Yeah.
They see themselves as being born to be used. And somehow we didn't reach them. We didn't reach them. And I don't know if you can. There is a whole group of women who think that they were born to be abused.
Yeah.
And we've never been able to reach them.
I just want to read this quote that I found. I cut it out years ago. I think the Plain Dealer had run it, and it's from Ohio's first women's rights convention in 1850. The author is J. Elizabeth Hitchcock Jones, And she said it during an address to these women. She said, I say the fact that woman does not know that she is robbed of her rights shows the extent of her enslavement. It shows that a long train of abuses and usurpations has completed the work of degradation, has blinded her to a sense of justice and equal rights. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, Em.
Yes, yes.
Women can't even see that it's happening.
And so, like June says, it all comes down to theocracy. It
Yeah.
comes down to the Bible.
Yeah, Christian. Yeah,
The
Christian
Bible tells you
nationalism.
who's the head of the house and who's the submissive one.
Yeah.
And who wrote all that?
So-
Men wrote all of that.
Yeah, and who wrote the Bible? It's
So-
right.
Yeah.
Right.
There are two compelling arguments that the Trump supporters are buying into or making that should disturb us all. First is the Christian nationalism, that
Yeah.
America is a Christian nation. And that's sweeping Europe as well. I mean, and that's
Yeah.
The other is what has been termed the great replacement theory that has also swept Europe and has now taken hold in America, which is to white Americans, there's this warning being given to white Americans that you're in danger of becoming a minority.
Yes.
Because, if you let all of these non-white immigrants come in. And Donald Trump has tapped into that by talking about, remember when he said, why can't we have immigrants from nice countries? Well,
Yeah.
from Denmark, Norway. I mean, his immigration policy is to allow European immigrants to come into this country.
And they don't want to come here.
And sort of
Right.
non-whites. I mean, and yet intelligent people that I have known, and you probably, both of you have known, June and Emily, for years, will make excuses for this man. People that I used to talk to, people who were hardcore Democrats, are now talking about Donald Trump as though he's the second coming.
Yeah. Terrifying.
It really
It
is.
They say he's really reformed the tax policies in this country.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
say, yes, for the wealthy. Are you wealthy? Well,
I think when
no.
that tax cut came, I
Yes.
think he got $1.55 in additional in my check every other week.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've said this to many people who support him and talk about that they liked his tax policies, because that's what I hear from anybody who supports him. They don't
Yeah.
like the man, but they like his policies.
Yeah.
And if they're middle class, they're paying more in taxes than they were. It's
Oh, I know. But I'm wondering if any of you are familiar with Project 2025. Have you heard of it?
I've read some of it.
Okay, it's
Share with
frightening.
me.
It's frightening. It's conservatives' detailed plan to dismantle our current government and institutions. And according to its website, quote, create a White House more friendly to the right. Ms. Magazine, though, calls it the right's dystopian plan to dismantle civil rights. And I've seen some of the talking points, and it talks about support for the family, which they have said, several of them have said, including Tuberville, that Democrats hate families. So that's another talking point that they're going on. And I'm wondering if any of you know any Trump supporters, and if you do, are you able to talk to them, or have you been able to talk to them?
I
One of my dearest friends is a Trump supporter. You can't talk to them.
No. And I find myself wanting to become violent and beat the shit out of them.
Me too.
No, I can't. So
I have one friend who is such a Trump supporter that when she starts talking, if I go to answer her, her husband will stand behind her and wave his arms at me and say, Emily, talk about flowers. Talk about he can't get through to her. I don't understand it. It has torn my family apart. I have unfriended members of my family on Facebook because I don't want to see what they're saying.
Mine too, and many people that I've talked to have the same story.
So
I want to talk about the Supreme Court.
go ahead.
Okay.
I am, it's unforgivable that Ruth Ginsburg did
Yes.
not retire.
Oh,
Why these elderly politicians feel that they are indispensable, that there's nothing beyond them that could ever replace them.
yeah.
What is the matter with these people?
I don't know. And she was a
It's
brilliant mind,
disgusting.
and she was deathly ill, fighting
Yes,
cancer.
yes.
And still, and I just heard or read somewhere recently that Obama had asked her to step down, and somebody else, do you remember who else asked her to step down? And she said no.
Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
she left us with this mess.
Yes, exactly. And now, whether or not, I guess the Supreme Court today is coming down with some decisions. I heard that earlier, but Trump wants presidential immunity. Can
Yeah.
you imagine?
Mhm.
That means this man is on a course of retribution and revenge that we will never believe.
Yeah.
If anybody thinks that he can't create a gulag of some sort or concentration camps, I can only hope that we go to the same concentration camp. I'd love to see you again, Emily. But we could have a
They
long.
wouldn't dare put us together.
But this is terrifying stuff. This is the same feeling I had 30, 40 years ago
Yes.
when I knew this was coming. I have the same feeling now, and I don't like it.
I don't like it either. Because
And
every time I hear something, I keep thinking about what my parents went through in the 30s and where my dad ended up. And it feels the same. June, I wanted to ask you.
Oh, but before that, because June made reference, I've just got the Associated Press up here. It says unanimous Supreme Court
yeah.
preserves access to widely used abortion medication. The 9
Yes.
justices ruled that abortion opponents lack the legal right to sue over
Yeah,
At least that's one bright spot in this huge.
Don't get too excited about
Right,
that, because
right.
I was listening to some legal scholars this morning, and they didn't protect mifepristone. What they said was they didn't have the standing to bring that.
Right,
The people
right.
who were bringing it didn't have the standing to bring it to them. So it's not protected. The states can still do what they want with it.
We are going to see young medical students just veering away from any OBGYN things at all.
Yeah.
Because a spontaneous abortion could put a gynecologist in prison.
Yes,
Mhm.
I know.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
we had several doctors on, we did a series on that whole issue, and we had several gynecologists tell us exactly that. And it's happening right now. I mean, there was just another case in the national news last week where a young father had taken his wife to get help when she had miscarried, and the doctors refused to give her the medication. They said they couldn't give it to her. And eventually she self-aborted at home and was bleeding all over the room. And we finally took her to another hospital, and they said, it's a good thing you got her here.
Yeah. That sort of thing happened.
That means nothing anymore.
Yeah. That
I think it's kind of crass to say out loud that what you think is happening is that we have Republican legislators who are trying to preserve the world for Republican white legislators.
Mhm.
I truly believe that this is their reaction to a country that is becoming more and more a country of color. We've been told,
Told for years.
advised for years that by the middle of the century, we will be a
All the
tan colored country.
Right,
That's
yeah.
the way it's going to work. We started out as a tan colored country. There's a reason where all those states out west have Mexican names. Come on, people.
Yeah.
And that's the way we were intended to be. We were supposed to be a melting pot. Unfortunately, we're a mixed salad, but I think that this is an effort to turn the clock backward and make them all, subject to the crown type people. Okay. It's never going to work. It's never going to work unless we have a dictatorship.
And what Donald Trump has done successfully, he has tapped into white grievance and railed against, all of these laws that for equality and all of that. But it's no accident that Make America Great Again. I've always suggested that the word again, is key because it goes back to a time when whites were in charge of everything.
Yes.
Non-whites knew their places. And he has tapped into that kind of thinking that if you're a white person, you're losing your country. What I find disturbing, and both of you, Emily, and also Taci, because I'd like to know how it has been in Turkey, is young women. How is it that young women are sort of, drawn to him? Because you remember, both of you, Emily and June, remember when you all used to reach out to young women and sort of help guide them in the way they in their professions and in politics and sort of prepare them for the political world. What has happened to that? Where are we falling short?
I think so many
ahead,
of them
Emily.
are members of a certain church. I think we're looking at fundamentalist, brainwashed,
Yeah.
brainwashed young women. Yes.
Who was the young senator was she from Mississippi that gave that ridiculous after this?
Yeah, the housewife.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah. And I think that society has sort of like done that, taught women that how wonderful it is to be frail and have someone who wants to take care of you and love you and tell you that you are the center of his household. And you are. Come on.
you
Yeah.
sure
He
are.
tells you that he can't live without you. The family circulates around you. You're perfect. You're his treasure. You're his treasure and nobody else's. And then, of course, he meets somebody else. And you are there trying to maintain the payments on that house that you were the center of and trying to feed those children that you were the mother of for him. And all of a sudden you realized that it was all so much, you know what? You can't get through to them when they're 20. They're believing that stuff. They're believing the football player who says that they have listened to a diabolical lie.
Yeah.
They are believing him. They want to be Cinderella to somebody's prince. And they don't understand that it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
We are all Cinderellas and we are all princes, and we better all be able to take care of each other
Yes.
instead of
No,
expecting to be
obviously,
taken
In
care
that
of.
whole scenario, they never talk about the other part where you can be the center of that household as long as you keep your mouth shut and don't get involved in anything outside of the home.
Right.
Go ahead, Jen.
Advice to young women today for those 20-year-olds is to get a passport and to start saving money. Have at least $5,000 or $10,000, because there will come a time when you may desperately need an abortion, and you're going to need to get out of the country fast. That is, unless they're keeping records of all pregnancies, which is also in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Yes.
Registering pregnant women.
Right.
Yeah.
And what disturbs me as a male is when, or by the way, I'm a traditional, I was brought up a traditional Roman Catholic. I was an altar boy. I go back those many years. When the bishop was in church, we had to actually kneel and kiss the ring. It goes back so far. I am now.
That wasn't in this country.
No, it wasn't. I grew up in East Africa, but the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church, where it talks about family values and yet ignores Donald Trump, who certainly isn't the paragon of family values, ignores all of the sins that he has committed within his marriages, and ignores that just because of one issue, abortion. And it is so disconcerting to people like me. And by the way, I have a cousin in Canada who's a physician, and he's a deacon of the church. My sister in England is sort of manages the Catholic Church in her village. And so there is a long tradition of Catholicism in our family. But I look at this and I think, my God, the hierarchy of this church has no shame, especially in America.
Yes.
Well, Bertram, I too was brought up in the Catholic Church, and I understand the beauty of the charity of the church. I understand all that. But it's not only abortion that they are losing their minds over. It is women in the priesthood.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Ain't never gonna happen, ain't never, because women are never going to have a voice in any part of the life of the church.
Yeah.
And
And
you
so
know,
they
women
get
are the
away
ones.
with all those heinous male crimes. They
Yes.
get away with the pedophile, they get away with horrible things because it's men allowing men to do it.
And
The
yet
nuns in the church have no voice.
it's women who are actually running the parishes. If you look at every Catholic parish, it's the women who run those things.
Yes, yes.
It's not
They
the
do the
men.
work anyhow. They may not
Yes.
make the decisions, but they do the work.
Exactly, exactly.
They keep the church together like they keep the home together.
Yeah.
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 You could talk all day about that.
let me bring Taci in to ask about young women in Turkey, because a lot of women in Turkey are educated, are highly educated, they're professional. I mean, and yet, how do young women view what's going on in Turkey? And are there some lessons for women in this country?
Well, I will first mention that, everywhere, considering Trump, some women like bad boys, they do like
Okay.
those type of characters. And in Turkey too, people never really thought that it would come to this with Erdogan. And I was mentioning, that once you establish once you really connect with a political leader and you establish your opinions, it's so hard to change them. And it takes a lot of education. And I'm not just talking about a university education and a degree, but it's more about growing in some way.
Well, it also involves keeping aware of who's involved in making these decisions. I mean, you have to self-educate, which I think
exactly.
that,
And I mean, of course, you have to be educated to be able to judge certain things.
yeah,
But sometimes education is not enough. And sometimes it actually helps to go to another country and have a different perspective, and then look at your own country from the perspective that you gain in another country. Because sometimes this is the only way you can get rid of your biases. And I feel like in the US, a lot of Trump supporters have not really traveled outside
Right.
the country.
a lot of
I mean,
Americans.
I know people who never traveled outside their little town. They
Yeah.
never even saw New York or California. I mean, you have to get out of your comfort zone to be able to judge better. And I feel like, in Turkey that has happened. But again, I think people don't understand the power of that resentment also
Yeah.
among the uneducated people. When they're looked down upon, instead of like, you're trying to understand why they think that way, then that resentment leads to supporting leaders like Trump or even Erdogan. And I think one of the things that I find similar between the US and Turkey is in Turkey, there is a very distinct polarization between the conservatives and the liberals. And the liberals are not even really liberal, they are conservative in different ways. And I find a lot of Democrats are also, somewhat conservative, I would think. So it's the similar situation in the US. The polarization is similar. The cultural wars, for example, we had a similar experience in Turkey with, like, if you say happy holidays, you are ruining Christmas. And, this doesn't really mean anything. It's just a made up cultural war that doesn't even exist. And we had a similar situation. So when you have an environment like that, I think that leads to the rise of those type of personalities, like, charismatic people who tap into people's opinions or grievances and resentments like that. And in Turkey, young women, I mean, when Turkey withdrew from the Istanbul Convention, there were a lot of protests, especially women protested against it. And, there are people who are more aware of the consequences. But I feel like a lot of young women who support leaders like Trump they don't understand what it may lead to.
What is the situation for women in Turkey these days?
Of course, Turkey is not like many of the other Middle Eastern countries, so people can still speak out and they can criticize the government, but there are certain boundaries there. And with women, sometimes, women who are being abused by their partners, it's hard for them to come out. Or, for example, if a woman is raped, the general conservative view is that, oh, the woman was, asking for it because of the way they are dressed. And there are a lot of traditional conservative people who think that way still. And I think Erdogan's presidency helps that view and supports that view and kind of, empowers people who think that way.
What about their clothing? Are they like Iran being forced to wear the hijab or the chador?
No. In Turkey, I mean, we have a very long history of being a very secular country. So in the past, before Erdogan was elected, there was some discrimination against women who were wearing the head cover. It was banned at universities. You couldn't work in, public jobs with a head cover on. And I believe that actually led to the election of Erdogan at the end. Today, it's a little more balanced, but now I see the opposite. Just like we were talking about Trump's revenge, I feel like Erdogan has this revengeful attitude that because, his wife wears the head cover and they were prosecuted by the seculars before, now he is trying to prosecute the women who are more secular and who dress more liberally, and I feel like there is that kind of persecution against the other side now. So when the conservatives are in power now, those are the people who are being, treated like the second class. I mean, and it's not bad like Iran or other Middle Eastern countries. Women are still free, but it has changed over the years. Definitely.
We're getting close to the time that we have to wrap up. So I have two questions actually for Em and you, June. You were talking about the marches. Do you foresee that happening again? And will you guys be on the buses?
Oh
You bet.
God, I'm so decrepit. Can you push a
I'll get you on there.
wheelchair?
We can help each other up.
Listen,
Some
they
pretty-
need the voices of people who've been there. They need the voices of women who know what the consequences are of not being in control of your own life and your own body. June Lucas, you'll be there next to me again if I gotta drag you.
Okay, I guess I'll be there.
And I had a question for you. When you were serving with Jim Jordan, did you see the starts of gerrymandering at the time you were in Columbus?
Oh, yes. Yes, that had started way back.
Did it?
Yes.
Was
Yes,
there
it
any
did.
pushback on it?
Not much. Not much. There would be the usual we're against that, but no, I don't think anybody was really taking it that seriously.
Yeah.
And especially from if you came from this region, from the Mahoning Valley, it was such a heavily democratic, traditionally, historically democratic region that, there was, this, June, and even you, Emily, know this, that in order to win a statewide election, there was always that rule. You need at least 60% of the vote out of Mahoning County, or a little less than out of Trumbull County. But that's how you won statewide. You came in as a Democrat and you wrapped up all the votes. And then, the same people who over the years that I've known voted, Democratic, their fathers are now Trump supporters. And that to me has been a shock.
They're not Republicans.
Exactly.
They're Trumpers or MAGA people or something. I have known some very fine Republicans. And, I would have
That party
preferred to
is
run as an independent, but you could only win as a Democrat in Trumbull County during my time.
Yeah. Well,
I
in a-
just wanted
go
to
ahead.
say something, because I have been thinking about this, and I mean, since I'm always comparing it to Turkey and I see the trajectory
Mm.
that the US is moving, one of my biggest concerns is that if Trump is elected a second term, I feel like he will do whatever he can to stay in power, and he's not going to leave. And I mean, you can see that
We
in
won't.
Erdogan started in 2003, and he's still the president in 2024. It's been 22 years.
Wow.
And-
What does Turkey's constitution allow?
Well, normally when he was first elected, he was a prime minister at the time. He could only run 2 terms. And his first term was actually good. I mean, I didn't think it would be that bad. And he had very moderate policies at the beginning, and he was trying to democratize the country. But then once he got elected the second time, everything changed. And he felt like the majority supported him, so he could do whatever he wanted. Then, after his second term, he changed the constitution. He brought a
He did.
presidential system, so he ran as a candidate for president this
Mhm.
time. And then he ran 2 terms for that, and then he made some changes. I don't think he should have run for the third time, but I mean, he destroyed checks and balances, and somehow he managed to run again. And we are still not sure if he's going to be running again next time. So I see that happening with Trump because of.
That's
like,
what the Project
similarities.
2025 is about, is putting more power into the executive branch and destroying the checks and
In
balances.
2017, after he was elected, Donald Trump did say publicly that there's 3 branches of government, co-equal branches of government, are inconvenient and are not practical, and that the presidency should be all powerful.
Yeah.
He made that statement,
Yes,
And-
he did.
and people just ignored it. And we did an editorial about this, saying, "Hey, this is a warning sign."
Yeah.
And yet you have a president saying this, and it's
I
sort
don't
of
think anybody believes it can happen. I don't think anybody
Right,
that's gonna, they'll be able to do that.
We never.
that's
believed-
right.
right. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, Emily and June. Wow, it was wonderful seeing you again after so many years.
Yes, it is. It really is.
Both of you have not lost your spirit, which is great,
Yeah.
because what's happening, especially in our region, is politics used to be important, and
Yes,
electing the right people used to be important, and that no longer is true.
because we don't have a vindicator. We have no newspaper.
Right.
That's why, too.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's so true.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's going to get worse. It's going to get
I
worse,
know.
June.
It really is. Well, again, thank you. We're going to do this again before the November election. And
Okay.
we're going to continue focus on the issues that people need to think about. But again, thank you for your time, Taci. Appreciate, again, all your help and effort and participation. We'll talk soon.